Hey, it's me, Nesser, and welcome to the Nesser Show. On the couch with me today is Mamobo Ogoro, a social psychologist and entrepreneur. Mamobo is also a founder of Gorm Media, a social enterprise. This episode is full of topics surrounding psychology, diversity, and education. I hope you leave inspired. Hey, it's me, Nesser. Welcome to another episode. Today I'm going to be your host, and this is our guest for today, Mamobo. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Could you please introduce yourself to people and just let people know what you do?
So my name is Mamobo. I am a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm 26 years old.
Yeah.
I am a social psychologist. I am an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. And I am also a lover of human beings. I love to connect. I love to organize.
Yeah.
So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, to say the least. Let's start off with the definition of social psychology and social entrepreneur, because a lot of the times in the generalized state of things, we see each on its own, but you've obviously found a way to make your love of people put in the psychology part and the entrepreneurship. Could you please maybe explain that to people who may be watching?
Yeah, so my background is in psychology. A lot of people ask me, they're like, oh my God, do you give therapy? And I'm like, no.
Go talk to somebody else.
Exactly. I'm like, no, I'm not giving free sessions here. But social psychology is like, psychology in itself is like an umbrella. And there's so many different types of psychology that we have. And social psychology is just like a section of the whole area of psychology. So social psychology is the study of human behavior in social groups and how different factors such as like, let's say culture or group dynamics affects the way we act and behave as individuals. So people often think that it's themselves that create who they are, but they often don't think of how their social group or the family or where they come from or different dynamics in society play a role on how they behave as individuals, who they are, how they express themselves. So social psychologists, we actually study that essentially and how different factors of social groups affect human behavior. So my background is in that, and I'm actually doing my PhD in UL.
Never ending PhD.
Do not do it. I am going on a rampage on the internet of like, do not do a PhD.
Girl, like you are inspiring in many ways, but my favorite way that you inspire me is to not do a PhD. Not that I planned on doing one anyway, but you've confirmed a lot of things for me, so I thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it's hit one person because I'm actually done.
That's great.
This whole PhD process, I learned a lot, but it's a process.
Yeah.
But I'm doing my PhD in social psychology and applied linguistics, and I'm looking at how systems of inclusion and exclusion affect second generation migrants in Ireland.
Lovely.
And in the height of COVID, I was coming up with so many findings with this research. And in the academic world, it's a world in itself.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of noticing all the findings that I was having was kind of staying in this sort of, for lack of a better term, elitist academic bubble that the language is inaccessible. People were not being able to read about all these things that were happening. So I was like, okay, how am I going to actually create something that people can engage and the everyday person can engage with? And it's not just really convoluted language that only 0.0001% of the population can understand. So it was at that time.
Not to stop you, but I also feel like there's two sides of that, right? Where it's like there's the elitist part of that, and then there's hot takes on things that actually aren't hot takes, right? It's like people don't understand the nuances in the way people behave.
Exactly.
Where it's like we might see Twitter topics and like arguments and stuff like that, that for lack of a better word, like that lack of literacy could shine such a light on.
Exactly.
And it's not an actual conversation. It's kind of like, this is actually normal.
And people don't want to talk. People don't want to talk about those nuances that happen. It's very easy to be black and white into 100%. Situations, and a lot of times this is just me being mean to academics. A lot of times academics are like, I don't want to put myself in that because they're just dumb and they don't want to talk about these things. So I'm like, we actually need to educate people, not just stay within ourselves and our really good conferences and be like, great work on that research. Meanwhile, the rest of the population don't have any clue what's going on.
That's how society's built, though, right? Like
Exactly.
that is in a capitalist society. Apart from money and capital itself, like education and knowledge is also a capital in itself. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like we'll definitely come into the diversity and inclusion thing, because even in a lot of communities, that's how people are oppressed with lack of literacy and information and things like that. But before we go deep dive into your findings, right, for everybody here, right, and everybody watching, you've had an amazing 2022. Okay, that was a metaphor. Let's just read off some of what you did. So you were Social Entrepreneur of the Year. You were nominated by Irish Businesswoman. Is that true?
Image Awards, yeah.
Yeah, love that for you. You were featured in a children's book, Be Inspired, Young Irish People Changing the World by Sarah Webb. I'm pretty sure that was like end of 21, was it? Into 22, or was it?
2022, mid
Yeah,
2022.
lit, because I know Rihanna was in that as well. You didn't mention this yet, but she's a founder of Gorm Media, which was one of 28 social enterprises in the country to be awarded in the Social Enterprise Startup Fund in 2022 by Rethink Ireland. We'll dive deeper into that. And you also won the Catalyst Award by Women of the Year. Catalyst Award, the Women of the Year by Irish Tatler. Like, how does that feel? Like, when you went into 2022, obviously there was a couple of lists, you were on a couple of them for like activists to watch and people to watch, 50 people to watch in 2022 in the Irish Independent. Like, that's just reeling off a bunch of stuff that I'm sure it's probably just scratching the surface of the things that you've done. Like, how was that for you? Like, just going into 2022, knowing that people were starting to check for the work you were doing, and then by the end of 2022, you were almost rewarded for that in different places. Oh, sorry. Also nominated as Activist of the Year in Black and Irish Awards after winning it in 2021. How was that for you? Kind of, how does it feel to live up to that, or just to be that person?
It feels good to be that girl.
Yeah, the it girl.
No, I'm joking.
That's me.
But no, it's coming into 2022. I'm the kind of person that thinks, like, my brain is always like 3 years ahead. So I'm always moving. And sometimes being recognized, it means like, oh shit, what you're actually doing is making an impact. And sometimes in my head, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I think that's just the entrepreneurial spirit in me.
Yeah,
that
that's definitely
keep going. But going into 2022 it was very surreal to kind of, I always say that, like, I started Gorm in my room in the height of COVID-19 in 2020. And it was just like a mini project that I started with friends and discussing social issues that affected the multicultural generation in Ireland. And never could I imagine that it would grow into something that I can actually, for one, live off, and grow into something that is creating an impact for different communities in Ireland. So when I started this kind of journey, I just wanted to, first of all, apply my research and apply some of the personal experiences that I had growing up in Ireland from a migrant family, X, Y, and Z. But it was really kind of surreal doing all of this work for nothing, just kind of doing it on a grassroots level, and then people buying into it and feeding into it, like, hey, this is really good idea. Come to this program. Here's this funding. Do this, and supporting the idea and really flourishing it and making it bigger than it can be. So when 2022 came, and I honestly don't feel like I'm there yet, to be honest.
Yeah.
But when 2022 came, it was just confirmation that this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I honestly feel like I'm living the purpose that I have in society. So it's not to be like, okay, you're it and you need to just stop now. It's like, okay, people are seeing what you're doing. You need to keep going. You need to keep finding new people to connect with, amplifying new voices, creating new connections between communities. So I've learned so much throughout the past year, and it's just confirmation to really keep going and really keep. For me, it's keeping the community first and keeping the impact first, and always have that impact in the first thing in my mind. How am I impacting the community? How am I affecting the community? How are we working for the communities that we serve? Because as a social enterprise, we're not just like a business, we're a social mission business. And the social mission and the social impact is number one.
Yeah.
So that's where we keep going and we keep moving, you know?
Hey, it's me, Nesser. So sorry to stop this episode, but need to take the moment to encourage you to like this episode and subscribe to Culture Shop. Thanks. I don't know what, I was meant to say something when I did that. Guys, just watch it.
but definitely let's touch on Gorm first. And I didn't want to go into Gorm. What exactly is Gorm?
Yeah, so it's a lot of things that we've developed over time. So
Yeah.
we started off as just like a multimedia project. So the project was around uncovering the voices of diverse people in diverse backgrounds in Ireland and having them discuss the social issues that affect Ireland's multicultural generation. So, for example, there's so many things happening in Ireland, but we never get that nuanced perspective. There's only a certain type of people talking about a certain issue now. It's not just like issues of racism or things like that. It's only a certain type of voice that we get to see when it comes to media and talking about contemporary things that are happening in Ireland. So I was like, okay, we need to make something that everybody, people of different backgrounds, namely culturally diverse backgrounds, can come and talk about it. So I started like a mini podcast with friends talking about social issues that were happening in 2020 and that were happening regarding COVID, Black Lives Matter, education, all these kind of things. And then from there, I think it was like a Facebook ad or I don't remember it specifically, but I saw it on Facebook. I think someone sent it to me that there was this Ideas Academy for Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, and they're an organization that support people that have socially impactful ideas to turn it into a social enterprise or a business. So I was procrastinating with my PhD at the time. And I was like, heck it, I'll just do this course. So I did the course, and they helped me really turn the idea into something that could be an organization. And they helped me really turn it into what it is today, which is Gorm Media, and we're a social enterprise. So it was from there that I got the first set of recognition. So out of the whole cohort, and I think we were like 40 or something like that, I was the one that was selected as one of 5 honorees for their 2021 gathering. So I was like, okay, what you're doing actually is people are recognizing it and they're platforming it and everything like that. So we actually grew from that, and then people were recognizing it, and that was leading into 2022. So as we were growing, we do a lot of multimedia based projects, but I was noticing that within those multimedia based projects, and especially as a business, you need to make money. That's just it. What I wanted to do, I didn't want to compromise what I wanted to do in order to appease to, let's say, a sponsor or a certain type of funder, because a lot of times in this world, you have to, particularly in the non-for-profit world, kind of sometimes have to change what you want to do in order to fit the funding criteria or what the sponsor wants at the end of the day. So I was like, no, I want the people to own their narrative, to have their voices authentically, not for what other people want to do. So I was like, okay, I need to make a different business model to really get the work that we want to do out there to fund this the creative work that we want to do. So at the time, a lot of organizations, they were because of my expertise as a social psychologist and the impactful work that we were having with loads of different communities, organizations were coming to us. They're like, oh, can you teach us how to engage with diverse communities? What is your take on diversity and inclusion? Can you come and talk to our leadership staff in terms of X, Y, and Z? And I was like, I don't want to teach anymore. And then I saw how much they were paying, and I was like, I will teach you.
I might do that.
I'll do that. So we have a really niche area in the world of diversity and inclusion. People just think it's just diversity and inclusion that I do, but it's very broad. Diversity and inclusion itself is so broad. You have the anti-racist people here, you have the inclusion people here, LGBTQ people here, all these people. So
and I think sorry for cutting you off, I think for Gorm, in the sense of working with you and meeting you and hearing you speak, I think it's quite interesting that you've actually tried to bring all of that together.
Exactly.
Like a lot of the times, speaking as a Black woman, from the Black community, we obviously see diversity and inclusion from our point of view, and everybody tends to champion their kind of level of oppression, like their source of oppression. So, for example, people in the disability group, that's what they would champion. People LGBTQ plus group that you mentioned, that's what they were champion. Whereas obviously there's subsets of people that will mix, like intersection. Exactly, that's the word. Thank you.
And the one thing and this is kind of the core of what we're trying to champion with our group. The one thing that all these communities they have in common is that feeling of being othered, is that feeling of not feeling like you belong. And that's what we actually want to overcome in what we're trying to do with Gorm. So our whole thing is, how do we actually effectively engage across lines of difference? So this could be different sexuality, disability, even like what we were talking about earlier, sports teams.
Yeah.
How do we effectively communicate with each other so we don't actually divide and everyone feels like to some extent they belong? So within Gorm, our whole mission is to unify across differences in order to advance belonging for marginalized communities. Of course, I have my biases.
Yeah, I was going to say, how possible is that? Because a lot of the times we talk about our intentions and how we want to do it. How is that perceived? From your understanding, is the general Irish population wanting that mix? Because it's easy to say from the marginalized community and the underrepresented, but at the end of the day, they're underrepresented and they're marginalized for a reason, right? And we all hear our voice, and our voices are amplified around us. But you're obviously going outside of that to the people who are on top or whatever, and you're trying to let them include these other people. How is that received from that group? Is that something that is looking like it's possible, or is it just an ideal?
And then just to challenge your language as well, is that I don't want them to include us. And I don't even like the language of us and them as well.
Yeah, you said this at your talk, yeah.
I don't want it in the language of I want to be included in your space, because if I'm in your space and I don't feel like I belong in your space, I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And I find that happens with a lot of communities when it's like, oh, let's just bring in the black people, where the black people are like, this is not, I don't feel like
This
I'm
ain't
doing
it.
my-
Yeah.
I want to go back. So it's challenging those majority group communities, saying that we're already diverse, but if we remain in our own pockets, that actually brings on more divisions, more stereotype, more prejudice, and that's what we don't want. So we actually need to create a space in which we're not just included. Our voices are a part of the core of what you want to do, if you get what I mean. So I challenge people to say that it's not like, I always say that it's not like diversity and inclusion and belonging, it's belonging first. Having people find a space where they feel like they belong first. Then you can create your inclusive practices and stuff, because people already know that they belong.
Yeah.
And then the outcome of that is diversity. So there's an analogy of like a dinner party. So if you have a party and the music is bopping, everything is great, but you include someone, you invite someone into the party, but they may not like they're there, but they may not like the music, or they may not like, they're just here and they're just standing there. I've had parties where I was like, just don't like this. I don't like this at all. So, but if you actually want to create a party where everyone enjoys the party, weeks prior to the party, you need to ask them, okay, what music do you like? What foods do you want to do? This, but a lot of majority group members in Ireland, they don't even do that work. They're just like, okay, let's build it and let them all come. Yeah. So what we're actually working with, and when we work with organizations, etc., is that we challenge them on that space of, rather than saying, okay, let's just include everyone, you need to do especially your leadership teams, you need to do all this work of, how do we foster a space of belonging? How do I become an inclusive leader? How do we become an intercultural leader, which is the ability to engage across lines of difference and lead a diverse organization? So we actually work in that space where we can, prior to any sort of strategy, policy, anything in place, as psychologists, we want to effectively not change, but shift the behavior and the mindset of leaders and organizations to support them in engaging across lines of differences. And we feel that we work on two levels in Gorm. So we work that's our top-down level. And in order to change systems, you need to change people in power. Yeah. So if we change the mindsets and the behaviors of those in power to be more intercultural, like what we say, we believe that the empowerment work that we're doing on the bottom up with communities, they feel like, okay, now I'm ready to go into this space. Yeah. And then the leaders in those organizations be like, okay, this space is a space for belonging already. So it just brings it. That's how we unify.
That's an amazing analogy, and like thank you for explaining that. I definitely think that what you said, definitely from what I've taken from that, is also twofold, where you're saying that the marginalized groups don't want to be present and feel like they're just there but not welcome. But at the same time, you don't want a situation where the majority group feel like this is being forced upon them.
Exactly.
And in what you said, right, and did a minor in psychology, not like you or anything, but one thing that's very prominent in every behavior change model is changing attitudes. And before anything happens, before you can do anything, your belief about making that change is a massive thing. So it's definitely good. Obviously, we do a lot of the work within ourselves. And even that talk we had in the summer, what we kept finding is that the narrative that marginalized groups don't want to be included, or marginalized groups only stay with what's familiar, is only true to a level where it's kind of like, at the end of the day, even when we're put into this space, we don't belong, because at the same time, the people who are already there, the majority, also feel oppressed now, because their attitudes is now being challenged, right? What they feel like they're comfortable in is now being challenged, because back to what you said about shifting, it's understanding that, okay, these other people can be in here, and now we're all mixing together. Because you don't also want a situation where it's, I'm the person at the party, it's my party, but I've asked everybody else what they want, and now I'm not happy. And I feel like that's from what I can see in Gorm. And I'll just read out, you've already said it, but your mission statement: Gorm is a space where your voice matters, in caps. We are a digital media social enterprise that aims to unify across social, cultural, political differences. And for me, being a Black woman, and especially moving to Dublin, I've seen a lot of kind of the struggles that the Black community have here. And I think if you're outside of Dublin, you'll understand that sentence a lot more than people in Dublin will understand. But it's kind of that struggle within yourself to want to so forcibly not belong, because you've also been rejected. And I feel like that trauma from whatever experience that you have, it's quite tough to kind of break. And that's something that we're finding within our community and outside. What's the biggest struggle you found when trying to do this action of unifying?
Like you were saying, it's the attitudes piece. It's actually your attitudes and your beliefs sometimes are so ingrained with you, and a lot of times people don't believe that. They just believe that is what it is, and they do not want to try to think outside of their perspective. They do not want to critically analyze why they believe what they believe. I always say, like, a true believer always questions what they believe, and if you go back to the main belief, then you're a true believer.
If you don't question it at all, your belief from the questioning.
Exactly.
But so back to psychology, how normal is it to feel defensive when somebody questions your belief?
100%.
It's not even a trait of somebody who doesn't believe. It's a trait of all of us.
It's every single person.
But it's just to get over that defensive nature, to understand that that's actually a normal feeling.
It's 100%
for me.
normal.
Because the reality is that you questioning me might end up like not confirming what I believe. And now to undo that is a process in itself.
That cognitive dissonance is
even
real.
Even outside of diversity and inclusion, if you've questioned why I do something or why I am a certain way because I'm fully ingrained in my identity in this thing, and if you're coming at my identity and you're questioning that, of course that's tough.
It's tough.
How do you get over that? How do you teach people to kind of win that battle within themselves?
I wouldn't say we teach people to win it within themselves. We give them the tools and then they do that work within themselves. So a lot of the work that we actually do in terms of teaching is in intercultural competence, which is the ability and skill to engage across lines of differences. And there's different sort of levels that you need to go in order to be. Intercultural competence is a lifelong journey, to be honest, but there's different skills that you go in terms of effectively engaging across lines of differences. And in Ireland, what we kind of see that people, there's three things that we have to do in intercultural competence. You have to gain knowledge, you have to shift attitudes, and the last thing is actual skills to engaging with difference. And what we're seeing with what's happening currently as we do is people are aware and people may have skills, but they don't want to change their attitudes. They don't want to confront certain biases or confront things that scare them to effectively engage with different communities. So the how to actually do that is really, it's empathy building, to be honest. One of the biggest ways to actually change people's point of view or change their mind is to actually have them be able to see from the other perspective. There's a term in psychology, it's called intergroup contact or intergroup relations, where we actually get people of really, really different communities to try to come together. It's inevitably going to happen in different countries. People have to come together, people have to work together. But one of the best ways to actually breaking it down or having people be aware of opening, let's say, the comprehension bias that they may have or beliefs that are so ingrained with them of a different group is that they have positive experiences with the people of the other group. So if you actually have a positive encounter with somebody who's totally different from you, then those beliefs that you may have would be like, hey,
you just naturally start questioning
you
them.
certainly naturally start questioning it to yourself. Or if you have, so it could be direct intergroup contact, which is meeting someone and then them breaking the prejudice that you may have had within that group, or indirect contact, which is reading a book, watching Gorm Media, and
Quick plug.
watching content that actually has people talk about their individual stories and experiences. And through that, you can actually question some of the beliefs that you may have if you're in that space of curiosity and openness. Some people, they enter the room just to debate and fire at you. But if you're in that space of openness and willingness to listen and learn, then you can actually break those prejudices that you may have. Because we all have, like, 100%. I would say a human without prejudice is not a human.
Yeah.
So we all have prejudices, we all have biases, we all have things that we come into this world based of how we're socialized that make us have beliefs that may not be as good as we want to be. So it's about coming into a room of space and trying to build empathy with people in other backgrounds and other communities as well, and coming into a conversation ready to listen rather than hear.
Yeah.
So a hearing is when you're something is coming towards you, but you already have what you want to say in the back of your head, or you already have your rebuttal or your debate or your defense. Whereas if you're listening, you're kind of digesting what that person is saying, and then coming back with more questions and trying to really go deeper as to why they believe what they believe or why you believe what they believe. And at the end of the day, if we don't agree, something is very fundamental to us, like let's say religion, then that's it. Yeah. At least you kind of understand and respect that person's way of living rather 100%. Than trying to hammer it in their face. Yeah. So it's about, and I think in Ireland, what we're in Gorm, we're actually creating a report around it as well. So what we're actually finding, some of the preliminary finding is that people are aware, a lot of people are aware of diversity in Ireland. They're aware that Ireland is changing. 1 in 8 people in Ireland are from a culturally diverse background, and that's growing year by year with new generations coming in and people being born, etc. People are aware that this shift is going to happen, and the vast majority are fine with that. But a lot of people are just scared.
Yeah, of course.
Scared of doing the wrong thing, scared of, and especially with the last 3 years, scared of being perceived as a racist.
100%.
Scared of engaging with people who are different
more
from
scared
them.
Of being a racist than being
perceived as a racist. But those, it actually brings, I'll send you a great study, but actually brings around the same feelings.
Not going to read it, joking.
The same feelings being perceived as one are being, what you said previously. Sorry. So it's when you're afraid of doing something, you're less likely to encounter it. Yeah. So what we're actually trying to do and tell people through our platform is that, like, it's not, you don't have to be afraid of being afraid of encountering people who are different from you. If you lean in with curiosity, if you lean in with empathy and openness towards different communities, regardless of if you're in a majority or minoritized group, if you lean it with curiosity, if you lean in with openness, then that's how we can actually create that space and where we unify across our differences. But what we're finding now is, generally speaking, a lot of people in Ireland are very just, it's not that people are racist, it's not that people are anything like that, they're just scared.
They just don't know what to do.
Exactly.
I definitely want to park the Gorm conversation for a bit because I feel like it's very intellectual. Hopefully you're learning something. But before I move on, I do just want to mention a lot of what you've talked about, right, is action-based, right? And it's living in that conscious mind. But it also, the flip side is also true. We already live in a society that's already predisposed to segregation, and not just of Black people, or like just putting people in boxes, categorizing people. And it goes back to the power of like media, news, what you're watching, the narratives that are being pushed in these things, right? Like the intercultural interactions that you've mentioned, like the easiest way to kind of to describe that is just familiarity. Like, how are you familiar with these people? And if the only way that I'm familiar with a certain type of group is from a biased narrative in what I'm watching, what I'm seeing every day in the life, because we're assuming that everybody's trying to take in the information that they want, but really and truly, that's not it, right? It's the same thing with us, even about majority groups, right? Like prior till now, like I found it easier to be around diverse groups like white Irish people, or what was the word, indigenous Irish people, like but now that I've moved to Dublin and I'm around more Black people, like, and like a certain type of Black people, now it's automatically harder for me to do the flip side, where before it was harder for me to be around Black people because what I'm surrounding myself by and what I'm actually consuming is promoting something else. It's not always a positive behavior. Do you know what I mean? But I want to talk more about you. How did we get here? How did you become you? How did you become and have this drive to continuously want change? Talk to me about your childhood. Like, how was that for you? Like, who is Mamobo in primary school?
I was crazy.
Yeah.
I was a child. In terms of me, as a child, I was one of those children that would just never shut up. I was one of those
Haven't
children.
stopped.
It has not stopped, and I'm so grateful for it. And so basically, in terms of my life, so I'm Nigerian.
Love that for you.
And my family moved to Ireland in 2000. I was 3 or 4, and we moved to Wexford in County Wexford in Enniscorthy, a really small town. So we lived in we lived in an estate. We like to call it the ghetto of Enniscorthy, but we lived in an estate, and I lived in the rough side of Enniscorthy, and it was. I always say, like, I would love to be like 7 again. Just going back to those years where you had no responsibility and just living as your most authentic self as a child. So as a child, my nickname as a child was Jaga Jaga. I was the, like,
for people who are not Nigerian, Jaga Jaga just means like literally this.
Anyhow,
just everywhere, man.
Everywhere.
Chaos.
My mom would always say that, like, between me and my sister. So I have an older sister and a younger brother. Between me and my sister.
Middle child, same.
Middle child syndrome, yay. But my sister would be the child that would be like, okay, you sit down there. My mom would leave for like an hour and she'll come back and my sister would still be sitting there.
Yep.
For me, you sit down there, my mom would turn her head, turn back, where the hell has she gone? So I was a kind of just very chaotic child, very all over the place. I talk too much. My mom would get so angry at me because I'll be telling out the school teacher our business.
You're one of them ones. My mommy beats me.
Exactly. My mommy beats me last night.
Social services?
Exactly. So, like, the teacher would be worried. And I'm like, okay, I had to quiet. But I grew up being just chaotic and eccentric and just being loud, to be honest. And
what was everybody else's perception of that? Except from your mom, obviously, like, struggling to keep handle of you. Like, how was that perceived? Like, in school, in communities?
In primary school, I was just myself. I didn't give a shit. I was just doing the thing. But when it came to secondary school, and, you know, the whole teenage kind of wanting to fit in and everything like that, it kind of, my spirit just went in. So I went to an all-girls school in Enniscorthy in first year. And I was just still my chaotic self, and that led to actually a lot of bullying. Yeah. And I moved school I told my mom, I was like, I want this other school services. Yeah. And I was like, nah. But I actually moved.
They hate me here.
They hate me. I hate this life. Yeah. Girls are toxic. I can't. Yeah. So I moved to a mixed school in a nearby town. And the bullying didn't stop, but I had a good group of friends. Yeah. And I could be more myself. So I was on, like, the outside, not the outsider group. So the outsider groups. I wasn't cool. I was with, like, the what's it called? The immigrants and the gays. So we were all together. We were all together, mixed in. We loved strong united. Yeah. So it was at that. I went to school there, and it was a much more better environment. I could be myself a bit more, but it was still very insular and quiet. I was still very, like, my Jaga Jaga spirit just, like, still went down.
So in what you've described and being an outsider, is that one of the reasons that it spurred you on for unity in what you work as?
I think those experiences I've always had this desire to belong to a group. Like, for me, sometimes I'm like, I'm just in my own lane sometimes, because I've never felt like I've been in, like, and I have good friends, everything like that, but I've never felt like in a group per se. So I've always had the desire to kind of want to belong in a group or feel like I'm part of I don't know.
Do you still feel like that now?
Not really. I'm more, I understand myself more as a person, and I understand, like I said, I'm in my own lane. So
does the positive feedback, like, in the sense of positive feedback loop, like, does that add to that? So, for example, if you were in your own lane, but you weren't getting as much rewards from it, do you believe that you would feel the same way about yourself?
I wouldn't say so, because because I understand, and with therapy too, I understand myself. Go to therapy.
2023, the message is the same. Don't start that podcast.
Go to therapy. But because I understand myself as an individual. I understand who I am, and I don't really attribute who I am with things that happen outside. I always say, like, who was I talking to this previously? But the awards and stuff are great, but it wouldn't stop me from doing what I'm doing, if you get what I mean. I'm like, that's really great. Thank you for acknowledging this. This is amazing.
Another one, thank you.
And and it makes me, it gives me a grace of gratitude as well. So I'm really grateful for it, and I'm thankful, but it doesn't make me better or less than who I am. I know who I am as an individual. I'm still learning about who I am as an individual, and it's always evolving. So I don't think that if I didn't have any of these awards or anything like that, I'll still have that yearning to belong, because I know who I am, and I know I belong in, like, for myself individually, I say I belong in anywhere I feel like I can be my whole self. And if I can be my whole self, then I belong. If I'm by myself and I can be my whole self, I belong. If I'm in a group and be my whole self, I belong. So I learned a lot from that journey from my childhood into teenagehood, and now I'm in my mid-20s now. So it's just trying to constantly try to be your whole self and be your authentic self in any space that you're in. Obviously, you have different parts of yourself that you show. So I'm not going to be, I can be very professional and I could be crazy.
That's just appropriate.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's basically being that authentic self in any space that I walk into. And if I'm not being that authentic self, or if I get that feeling that, like, you're not being yourself, you're not being true to who you are, I'm a dip. I'm going. This is not for me. Yeah.
If you were to be met with, so before you moved schools, if you were to be met with that person again at your lowest point, what would you say to yourself to improve your situation?
I would say to myself that, like, this is going to pass. Do you get what I mean? And I have a funny story.
Not laugh.
I have a funny story, and I sometimes I think about it, because I was like, damn, if you were thinking about that as a 12-year-old, man, good on you. There's this girl that, like, she made my life like living hell, and it was horrible. She's probably one of the reasons I moved. And I remember that stuff, and this is the empathy building skills and stuff like that. But I remember that she was having a difficult time in her life, and, like, family members died and things like that. And I don't know, maybe it was just my crazy energy that's,
she picked you.
Yeah. So I knew I was moving school at that time, and it was the summer exams. So I remember, I don't even know if she saw the letter or anything, but I remember I wrote a letter to her and be like, just to let you know that you made my life hell. And I don't know if it's part of your mom's whatever happened or whatever's happening in your family. I just hope that you find whatever makes you peace.
Yeah.
And anyway, and I put it in her locker. It was the last day of school. I put it in her locker, and then I left. I don't know if she read it or anything, but that kind of spirit, I had that kind of spirit as a child, understanding how to actually see from that other person's perspective, even though they're making your life a hell.
Yeah.
So sometimes, now I'm at that stage, sometimes I try to block, because a lot of people ask me to do stuff, but I would tell my younger self that, like, all these kind of things that you're doing it's going to lead to something greater, and you just have to endure it right now. And as you endure it, it's going to make you into the person who you are, and it's going to make you more in touch with not only your childlike self, but bringing it to a place where you can actually have impact for different people that have felt like you as well. So I really commemorate myself sometimes. I'm like, shout out to me. Shout out to me. We've been doing this.
Yeah.
We've been doing this. We're going forward. So
it's good.
It's amazing to see how the progression has gone from being this kind of scared 12-year-old to this person who's still scared.
Yeah. I think
going through the fear as well.
It's so important to acknowledge that. I think as a vocal and confident woman, like, I think it's okay for people to know that you're not perfect. Like, it's not like, bro, I feel things. You just don't see them. Like, I don't express them the same way that you do. Do you know what I mean? And that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you
One
for
of my
that.
favorite books is it's by, I forget her name, Susan. I think it's Susan, but it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
I know.
So it's about, everyone thinks they're like, oh my God, you're so confident and all these things. That I'm like,
Inside, I'm shitting bricks.
shitting myself. I'm actually scared.
This is me on a daily basis. Like, literally.
I just do it scared. And I'm with a group as well. They're a group of female founders. It's called Awaken Hub. And one of their founders, I was talking to her, and there's a phrase that they use called fur coat, no knickers. And it's this idea that, like, sometimes you just have to have your fur coat with absolutely nothing inside and go through the door and be like, I'm confident, but inside you're like, oh, you're shit. So that's kind of how I'm living my life these days. So just YOLOing.
Girl, you're YOLOing to the top. But I want to talk about something that's a bit lighter. So you have a pretty, like, you come from a pretty, like, interesting family. So your mom, singer, like, Nigerian gospel singer, but also a pastor. So, okay, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your dad directed a Sophia in London.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's like that's the reason why I was like, oh, being Nigerian is cool.
Yeah.
You get me? Because I'm Igbo as well, and my dad reminds me of a Sophia in London.
Really?
Like that was just my dad's nature, man.
Is
like,
it?
Just crackhead. But talk to me about that, like growing up as a child and having these two figures. First of all, did you see, obviously you're older now and you understand labels and you understand what your parents did or are doing. Did you see your parents as that growing up?
No.
No, yeah.
Not at all. So my parents are divorced. Okay. So they divorced, like they were separated when I was very, very young. So I've never really seen them together per se. So
but as parents, like as mom and dad that are director, gospel singer.
Like, now I appreciate my mom a lot more than I did. But you just see them as your parents. You don't see them as their title or what they've done. And then they'll be like aunties and uncles, like, you know, your daddy's big. Your daddy's big.
How does that feel?
I'm like,
because I felt like that. Like I felt like that in the sense of people telling me all these things that my dad did, and I'm like, cool,
great, that's awesome. All right, it's. I don't really feel anything because they're just your parents.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like my mom raised us, and my dad. My dad loves work. He works a lot. Yeah. So that's kind of how the dynamic was. And my dad to this day still lives in Nigeria. Yeah. So we visit him in Nigeria and everything like that. So it was surreal. Like my mom, she kind of, to raise us, she kind of gave up her music, and she was a big kind of pop star in Nigeria in the late 80s, 90s. But in order to raise us, she was a single mom. So she took care of us in Ireland and everything like that. So she really, really, in my head, she was just mom. Yeah. But she kind of, for me as well, I love music and I love singing. So because she's a singer as well, she kind of put that in my spirit too. And I think that's how I get the confidence to talk and just go out in crowds and things like that. But she would literally like, go and sing in choir, go and do this kind of thing. So
you also dedicated your Catalyst Award to her, right?
No,
or you like in your speech?
Yes. Yeah. So my mom, she's basically one of the people that just keep, the kind of person that just keep going. And she would never kind of like, even if I wanted to do something crazy, she wouldn't like judge anything. She'd be like, as long as your spirit is telling you to do it and is doing something. And that's where I get my community spirit as well, because she's a pastor. So she's the kind of person that pushes us to keep going. And then my dad on the other side, he's just like my strategy person. Yeah. So I was having like difficulties in business. I'll just be calling my daddy. This person did this to me. And he'd be like, okay, this is how you do this. This is how you go. Or like even with Gorm, he's the person that first invested in it. So I'm using my nepotism. I'm a nepo baby.
Come on. I love that for you. Like I love that that's your experiences with them. Obviously they're just parents and you will have whatever natural struggles you have with them. But to know that your dad like invested in your company, to know that your mum pushed you to do all these things, because one thing I love breaking down is that narrative that Nigerian parents don't support their kids or African parents don't support their kids, right? And especially from an immigrant background, I understand that that may be the reality for some people, but I also want to push positive narratives out there. I want to push that African parents are like helping their children's futures. Like it's not you obviously you're making your mom proud, and obviously academically you
That
did
PhD
well
is
also.
hers, it's not mine.
Do you get me? But like at the same time, it's obviously like a lot of us feel like we were like oppressed by the way they treated us and they wanted us to do certain things. But in the sense that yes, someone might say, oh, because you're like somewhat of a poster child, I'm not gonna lie. I probably wouldn't like you if we were still in secondary school either. But it's kind of like just being able to know that you're doing something out of the box. Do you get me? And your parents are there and they're willing to support you. And I love that narrative and I just want to continue pushing that. And I'm so glad that I didn't know what you were gonna say with regards to that, but in the sense of doing research about you, I think that's just amazing to keep seeing these things and know that it's close to home, not just some random Black person that was successful a million miles away. Do you know what I mean? Back to giving ourselves a sense of empowerment and just inspiring in some sort of way. Do you get me?
Yeah.
So
No, my parents, like my family in general, so most of my mother's side of my family lives in Ireland.
yeah,
So they are just like the catalyst. Before anybody was doing any awards, they were the people that
Yeah.
keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
Do you need help with this? With this.
I love
Take
that.
this. So my like when people like some of my white friends, they're like, oh, I don't really talk to my cousins and things. I'm like, what? We have a group chat.
Some of them walk on, pull up.
So my family are we're extremely close.
That's good.
Christmas is like 25 people in the house,
Yeah.
chaotic, but I wouldn't have it any other way. They're like my number one first fan base that
Love
have
that
been
for you.
rooting for me and everything that we've been doing. Even my auntie yesterday, she's like, how's our business? How's it going? And I'm like,
That's why they support you,
our
bro.
business.
They see the cha-ching, innit? Like, joking.
So yeah.
But just to kind of wrap it up, right? And thank you so much for coming here and checking with me and everything and just talking about your story. And we've talked off camera, we've talked like the little that we've talked, right? The last question I want to ask you, right? As somebody who's succeeded loads, right? You're succeeding in so many ways, and from the outside point of view, it seems like anything you touch turns to gold, right? Or euros or whatever. What's your flaw? What is something that you struggle with? Because everything you've talked to me about, you found some positive spin on it. You found a way to make it work. What's something in your life, either business-wise or personally, like that you struggle with, that obviously that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I would say I have a lot of anxiety. People don't realize I have a lot of anxiety, and I can be a people pleaser sometimes. I'm learning how to take a step back.
Bro, that's me this year. It's so annoying.
Learning how to take a step back with that. But I think with me, I'm a bit of a control freak sometimes, and it comes from, not to go read too deep, but it comes from this
Go as
idea
deep
of
as you want. It's amazing.
always having to always feeling like I have to do it myself. So one of my biggest flaws is like not trying to over control the situation and not letting things be. I'm at the stage, I've already, 2020 is my soft life era. I'm just going to relax.
It's 2023, by the way.
No, 2023.
Girl.
2023 is going to be my soft life era. I'm going to relax, trying to be at ease with not being in control of everything. And that comes from my childhood, trying to, like a lot of children with single parents, they had to kind of take care of a lot of things by themselves.
Yeah.
So as a child, me and my siblings, we always had to take care of a lot of things by ourselves because my mom was working X, Y, and Z. So I've transplanted that into my adulthood and into both my personal and professional life, where I feel like I have to control everything. And and as an entrepreneur now, I'm starting to realize that in order to grow, your hands can't be in everything. In my personal life, in order to be a better person, you can't control every facet of your life. So I'm trying to be in a space where I can be at ease with the chaos of not being in control and be okay with.
It's scary though.
It's very scary.
Because it's so weird when I talk to people, right? I think it's God, man, because it's not something that I plan. I didn't know she was gonna say that, but for me, I had this conversation with my mom the other day, and I'm the same, where it's like, I didn't come from a single parent home, but a lot of the times, like, it was one or the other that was there at the time. And like, I found being a middle child that I almost took the reins, and I was like, okay, you're not here, so I have to make sure that this is cooked and whatever. Really and truly, I probably didn't have to do that. Like, my dad was probably gonna cook for us, like, do you know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, I just felt like I needed to take control because at times there wasn't control there. And like you said, like if you put my brother down there, he's gonna be there when you get back. Like I was the opposite. Like if you put me there, I'm gonna see what else is there.
Exactly.
And then I might come back here if I find that this is where I like to be. And I didn't realize that as much, but something happened like a couple of weeks ago, and I was triggered by my mom helping my brother, but my mom not helping me in something. But it's that like hyper independence.
Hyper independence.
But it works both ways, right? Because I've been so independent my whole life that my mom trusts that I can do something by myself. It's not that she doesn't care about me or whatever, because my mom tries to be there for me. And most times I'm like, bro, it's all right. Like, you get me? But it's like that understanding that I was like, I've been asking you for this thing. You didn't really give as much level of help, but he asked you and you're helping him on a different level. And it's like, I was so hurt. And it was something that I didn't know that I felt. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it's so amazing to hear you say that. It's kind of like giving me a bit more perspective on my life and the way that I do things as well. And it's like, I hope you really get to the end of that, the people pleasing, because I haven't made a TikTok about that. The people pleasing, the control and stuff, because you do have a lot, juggling a lot of balls at once, pause. But it's just kind of, yeah, just thank you for sharing that. And do you know, like on the show we have a tradition in general of just kind of giving people their flowers, making sure like that they know that they are loved and appreciated, and that you inspire me and the rest of us. But I thought we'd just probably give you flowers. I don't know if you're a flower person. It's just a gesture
I love plants.
of appreciation.
Oh, thank you so much.
Just so that you know, like it's not the Tatler Award or anything, but just so that you know that you are appreciated, and hopefully they can kind of brighten up your room for 2 days before they die. But yeah,
thank you so much. No, I really loved having this discussion today. It was really eye-opening. Thank you.
Sorry for us. Guys, that was it. That's Mamobo. If you have any questions or comments about anything she says, make sure that you comment them down below. Don't forget to subscribe to Culture Shop and let us know your thoughts. Thanks.